Emily, my sister, was a quiet and reserved person who always followed the rules. She was a petite woman, barely 5 feet 2 inches, with a kind heart that made her well-liked in our small town of Austin, Texas. Emily had never had any issues with the law and was known for her volunteer work at local charities. On the day of the incident, Emily was driving back from a community event when she was pulled over by police for a minor traffic violation. As Emily stepped out of her car, she took a few quick steps towards the trunk, possibly to retrieve her license. However, the officers misinterpreted this action as resistance and immediately pinned her to the ground. Witnesses later disputed the officers' claims, stating that Emily was cooperative and posed no threat. The officers used excessive force, restraining her tightly and causing her significant injuries, including deep bruises that would take months to heal. Some of these injuries became infected, causing Emily immense pain and discomfort. Emily's case was compared to other instances of police brutality in the area, such as the case of Michael Ramos, who was fatally shot by Austin officers during a confrontation. Emily's family and friends rallied around her, calling for justice and accountability from the police department. Despite her fragile condition, Emily became a symbol of resilience and a catalyst for change in the community. Emily's family decided to file a lawsuit against the Austin Police Department, alleging excessive use of force and violation of her civil rights. The lawsuit sought damages for her physical injuries and the emotional trauma she endured. Months after the lawsuit was filed, Emily faced another shocking encounter with the police. This time, she was walking home from a friend's house when she was stopped by Officer Johnson. "You're under arrest for loitering." "But I'm just walking home. I live nearby." "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." As Officer Johnson tried to handcuff her, Emily pulled her arm back in surprise. "You're resisting arrest. Get on the ground." "I'm not resisting. Please stop." Officer Johnson pushed Emily to the ground, kneeling on her back. "Stay still. You're hurting me. Please get off." Despite Emily's pleas, Officer Johnson continued to apply pressure, causing her more pain. "Shut up and stay still. This is wrong. You're going to regret this." The incident ended with Emily being taken to the hospital for her injuries. Emily's lawyer says, "We will not stand for this kind of brutality. We demand justice for Emily." As the investigation into Officer Johnson's actions continued, more disturbing details emerged. It was discovered that Officer Johnson had a history of misconduct, including several complaints of excessive force and harassment. Despite these allegations, he had managed to avoid serious consequences, often being transferred to different departments rather than facing disciplinary action. One of the most shocking revelations was that Officer Johnson had been involved in a previous scandal where he was accused of falsifying evidence to frame innocent civilians. This led to a series of wrongful convictions, which were later overturned after an independent investigation. Emily's lawyer. Officer Johnson's actions are not just a case of individual misconduct. They reflect a systemic problem within the police department. We will push for a thorough investigation and reforms to ensure this never happens again. Officer Johnson's defense attorney. My client is innocent until proven guilty. We will vigorously defend him against these allegations. The next real story from a subscriber shocked me. It was a typical evening in our small town of Willow Creek. My younger brother, Jack, had just gotten home from his part-time job at the local grocery store. He was a hard worker, always trying to help out our family since our dad passed away a few years ago. My mom was struggling to make ends meet, working 2 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads. As Jack walked home, a police car pulled over behind him. Officer Jenkins stepped out and demanded to see Jack's license and registration. Jack explained that he was just walking home and didn't have a car, but Jenkins wouldn't listen. He started searching Jack's backpack, claiming he had received a tip about a suspicious person in the area. Jack was confused and scared. He knew he hadn't done anything wrong. "Officer, I don't understand what's going on," Jack said. "I'm just going home from work." Jenkins ignored him and continued the search. He found a small pocket knife that Jack used for his job at the grocery store and claimed it was a weapon. Jack tried to explain, but Jenkins wasn't interested. "You're coming with me," Jenkins said, handcuffing Jack. I received a call from Jack's friend who had witnessed the whole scene. I rushed to the police station, worried about what was happening. When I arrived, I spoke to the officer at the desk and asked to see my brother. After a while, I was allowed to see Jack. He was shaken, but unharmed. I demanded to know why he was arrested, and the officer told me about the pocket knife. I explained the situation, but it seemed like no one was listening. The next day, I decided to visit the police chief, hoping to resolve the situation. Chief Lewis listened to my story, but I couldn't tell if he believed me. "I'll look into it," he said. But these things take time. Days turned into weeks, and I heard nothing back from the police department. Jack's case was still pending, and he was anxious about what might happen next. I tried to reassure him that everything would be okay, but deep down, I was worried. As time passed, it seemed like nothing was being done to address the situation. Jack's arrest remained a mystery, and the lack of action from the police department only added to our frustration. It felt like justice was moving slowly, if at all. I couldn't help but wonder if anything would ever change, or if this was just how things were going to be. The uncertainty hung over us, leaving us with more questions than answers. I walked into the police station, determined to get some answers. It had been weeks since my brother Jack was arrested for no reason, and we still hadn't heard anything back from the department. I approached the officer at the desk and explained my situation. "Officer, I need to speak to someone about my brother's case. He was arrested for having a pocket knife, which he uses for his job. It was a misunderstanding, and we've heard nothing since," I said, trying to keep my frustration in check. The officer nodded sympathetically. "Let me see what I can do. Can you fill out a complaint form?" I nodded and took the form. As I filled it out, I couldn't help but feel a sense of injustice. Why was it taking so long to resolve this? Why wasn't anyone listening to us? Once I finished the form, I handed it back to the officer. "I'd like to speak to Chief Lewis," I said firmly. "I need to know what's going on with my brother's case." The officer nodded and picked up the phone. After a brief conversation, he told me that Chief Lewis would see me in a few minutes. When I met with Chief Lewis, I explained everything again, trying to convey the frustration and worry that had been building up. "Chief Lewis, I understand that mistakes happen, but it's been weeks. My brother is anxious, and we just want this resolved," I said, my voice steady. Chief Lewis listened attentively, his expression serious. "I apologize for the delay. I'll look into it personally and get back to you soon," he promised. I left the station feeling a bit hopeful, but still uneasy. And last story for today, it was a chilly autumn evening in the small town of Maplewood. Alex, a young journalist, had been investigating a series of complaints about police misconduct in the area. He had heard rumors about a particular officer, Officer Ryan, who was known for his aggressive behavior. Determined to get to the bottom of the story, Alex decided to confront Officer Ryan directly. He tracked him down to a local diner where Ryan was known to hang out after his shift. As Alex entered the diner, he spotted Ryan sitting in the corner, sipping a cup of coffee. Alex approached him calmly and introduced himself. "Officer Ryan, I'm Alex, a local journalist. I've been investigating some complaints about your behavior on the job," Alex said, trying to sound professional. Ryan looked up, his expression unyielding. "What are you talking about?" he growled. Alex pulled out his notebook and began to read from it. "There have been several reports of you using excessive force and making unjust arrests. I'd like to know your side of the story." Ryan snorted. "Those people are just troublemakers. They don't know what they're talking about." Just as the conversation was heating up, a commotion erupted outside. A group of armed robbers had entered the diner, and a shootout ensued. In the chaos, Alex was caught in the crossfire and wounded. As he lay on the ground, he saw Officer Ryan trying to return fire, but his gun jammed. He was unable to shoot back at the robbers. The situation was quickly brought under control by other officers, but Ryan was taken into custody for his inability to perform his duties. Later, Alex learned that Ryan had been charged with negligence and was facing disciplinary action. It was a strange twist of fate that the officer he had been investigating was now facing justice himself. As Alex recovered from his injuries, he couldn't help but think about the complexity of the situation. Sometimes, justice can be unpredictable, and those who are supposed to uphold the law can fail in unexpected ways.